Hey, Amy, how are you doing today?
Hello, Alexis. I'm wiped out today.
Yeah.
And we're gonna play with Capricorn season. And we've got a card reading for our fabulous birthday review winner today also.
We do. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. So we're going to start with a card reading for the winner of our birthday giveaway. Then we'll go into Capricorn season. We'll do a little forecast for what's to come during Capricorn season. And then also just to drop it in case we forget to mention it, but we're going to also be doing a 2022 forecast. So keep an eye out for that the end of December.
Absolutely. I love it. So the deck that we're using is the Sacred Rebels Oracle deck. I'm going to try to keep my mouth moving in the right direction today. Let's see what card comes up. Tell us a little bit about our winner, Alexis.
Yeah, so very exciting. Our winner is Sherry. She wrote us a beautiful review on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, we're going to be pulling a card for Sherry, what to expect for Capricorn season. So it's going to be a card. We'll have Amy pull the overall theme, and then I will pull a supportive archetype for Sherry.
Love it. Well, Sherry, your Sacred Rebels Oracle card for Capricorn season is receiving. I've got window glare, I've got light glare, but there she is. She's like sipping out of part of a shell. And there's all of this light and goldenness to it. She's very clearly relaxed. She's enjoying what she's sipping. So yeah, this is the receiving card. Yeah, it's a really beautiful card. There's some sea green. It's very watery. It's very sea goat. And what are we going to build through our receiving? Yes. And that sometimes a piece of the building is building our ability to receive.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think for a lot of people, receiving can be difficult to different degrees. And then we kind of we get used to one level of receiving. And then we're asked to, and can you receive more? So I think it starts a lot with ourselves. Like I even notice, like if you get a compliment, are you able to receive it? Like fully receive it, right? And then as you move through the levels of receiving, yeah, sometimes it can be like the bigger things that are coming for us. We have to be more open to receive them.
Yeah, we have to have a capacity. And so it is those little things. I love the compliment example. Can you receive a friendly glance? Like all of those small moments, the small, when we walk by our pets and give them a little stroke, their ability to just like suck that in. They are excellent teachers and guides in how to receive. The receiving, there's such magic in this little cup she's holding, this little shell that she's holding and drinking out of, like the elixir of life is actually what's coming. Is that when we're receiving and in that soft open place of receiving where we don't feel like we have to shelter, we're drinking in the elixir of life.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it has a very nourishing feel. Like what are the things that are nourishing for you as she is like sipping from that bowl, which can be anything. It could be food, but it could also be things that are nourishing to you, lighting a candle, taking a bath, going for a walk. And also I noticed on that card, it was number 27.
Yeah.
So that adds up to the number 9, which is 9 is the end of a cycle. And so that feels like a piece of it too, that, going through whatever kind of those ending bits are so that you can be ready to receive what is coming your way. So that also may resonate if it feels like ending of a cycle in some way. And then I'll pull a supportive archetype. So this is from the Wild Unknown Archetype deck. And I love the back of the cards are like these diamond kind of background. So let's see what a supportive archetype is for Sherry. Ooh, the Destroyer. So this feels like that fits into that end of the cycle piece. that 9 number, the end of the cycle, the destroyer. So I think in Hindu mythology, Shiva is a destroyer, and he is this, it's the cycling, right? Like that is an important, when he wasn't doing his job, when Shiva in mythology wasn't doing his job, things also couldn't be created. And when he wasn't around, it wasn't a full cycle. So there's that piece in it too. There's the, like releasing what needs to be gone. And this is a really like interesting card too. It almost looks like, I don't know if it's an owl or it has those eyes. There.
Sorry. Computer, do not disturb doesn't work.
Yeah, well, it feels too like that's like that like external noise and chaos that I feel like we're in a lot of that. And I felt that like, yeah, I felt that kind of step up a notch, like the outside noise and anxiety. And so as I'm holding up this destroyer card, like it's like, and we laugh, like we could edit and we could like, take that out, but no, it's all there for a reason, that it feels like that's part of maybe the message here of like what needs to
be destroyed.
Right, is some of the external noise maybe, or also just, what comes up for you when you feel into all of that. But yeah, any last pieces, Amiee?
A reminder that you're so loved. That's all. Like you're so loved and you're so held. And this is really for everyone, because we are collectively feeling the weight of things, and a reminder that like we are pieces of the universe that get this amazing opportunity to land in a meat suit. And this is like, we're going to go into Venus. So we're just going to start right now. We have this opportunity for pleasure and joy and play and being in relationship and interacting. And there's so much potential because the universe loves us. It has our back. It wants us here. We are pieces of it. It's not going to abandon itself. It doesn't have our little human hangups where we self-abandon. The universe doesn't self-abandon. And the universe is not going to abandon any of us.
And just to bring in that, like the overall card was that receiving card, which is a beautiful card. It has this very soft, like nourishing, like you are taken care of, you are held. And to trust that is, yeah, that is real. I love that card. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful card. Yeah.
So yeah, yay, Sherry. I hope that resonates and lands. And again, take what resonates, leave the rest. And yeah, we're excited. We are doing card readings on our Patreon. So if you want to check us out on Patreon, we're doing a card each month, the start of each month, and then also a full moon reading. So we just posted our full moon reading for December, a full moon in Gemini. So go check that out.
We've got 3 tiers now. If you don't know what Patreon is, it is, like for me, it feels like a more held container. It's an opportunity to offer a small pinch of monetary support to those of us who are out in the world creating. So there's 3 tiers with our Patreon. There's a $1 tier, a $5, and a $10. So if you want to support the things that Alexis and I are doing, we would love to have you.
Awesome. Yeah. And even that $1 tier can just be like, we love you. We think what you're doing is great. Keep doing what you're doing. And it'll all go towards also like, I have this vision of us like on a vacation, and we have like a really nice podcast microphone and we're just sitting around like, there's things that we can give back, that we can upgrade our ability to give back to you. So that is there. We will put
Especially since I have a reputation of being very quiet. Hence my dorky headphones and microphone most of the time.
Yeah, we'll upgrade Amiee to a microphone instead of the headphones, which they're perfectly fine. So yes, go check out, we'll put the link for Patreon in the show notes so you can check that out. It's patreon.com/rootedcosmicwisdom. Yay. So we can move now into our Capricorn forecast.
Oh, Capricorn season.
Yeah, we are headed out of Sagittarius season and into Capricorn season, which is an earth sign. It's cardinal earth, so it has that ability to really start things and bring things into being, right? It's an earth sign, so like it's not just about dreaming the dreams. We had Sagittarius season, which is about being the visionary, kind of seeing what's possible, and then Capricorn season is about bringing it in, bringing our dreams, and even, you know, not just from Sagittarius season, but from the whole year. We get to enter Capricorn season each year. So ready to dive in?
Ready to dive into Capricorn, the builder, and taking those dreams, taking those deep desires and the things that we want, and how do we build them in our world? What are we willing to like shift and gamble to bring in what we want?
Yeah, and just a few other pieces on Capricorn. Its symbol is the sea goat. So it has this very also mystical feeling, because it's right, it's half goat and half like fish, mermaid bottom body.
It's like a goat that swims.
Sea creature. Yeah, it's obviously very mythical, right? Like, but it has this ability to, and it's interesting that it's an earth sign, but it also has this watery depth to it, where it's able to, it's like there's this maturity to Capricorn. I think of, it's ruled by Saturn. It has this Gandalf, like this wise kind of feel of that, you know, earth. It's very practical and grounded, but it also has this mythical component as well. So it's, I also describe it as like the CEO of the zodiac. Like Capricorn is very much about, like you said, it's the builder, and it is about like making things happen, right? Capricorn is not about just dreaming it. Like that's not enough. Capricorn needs to see it come to be manifest. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, those are just another couple pieces on Capricorn that is ruled by Saturn. Also, the symbol is the sea goat. So we'll go, just so you get a kind of feel for it, we'll go into all of it, of course, as we dive in. And just before we enter Capricorn season, so the sun will enter Capricorn on December 21st. We start right before that, we have a full moon in Gemini. So just to drop that in, so we get a little context, is like what we have right before Capricorn season. We have a full moon in Gemini that is aspecting Jupiter in a harmonious aspect. So Jupiter is about expansion. Gemini is about the mind and curiosity. And so there's an expansion there. It's also the first full moon after the eclipses. So we get this clearing kind of energy with that full moon. That's December 18th. And then the 19th, December 19th, Venus stations retrograde. So those are just a couple pieces that we might come back to, but just so you know, that's right before we enter Capricorn season on December 21st.
Yeah, that this is our first like big lunation since we're coming out of eclipse season. We're merging. We've got this beautiful full moon in Gemini. It peaks I think like 6:30ish Central Time on Saturday, the 18th. And there's, you know, you bring in Jupiter to that. It's just blowing up the goodness, moving us out of there. It feels like there's so much movement out of right now. The end of the year, the end of Sag season, the end of this, 2021 eclipse season. We're making a nodal transition. We'll get into all of the 2022 forecast. There just is such a feeling of shifting with this. And it's like this this is the last full moon of the year, this chance to illuminate so much. What can we see? Get out and moon, well, you know, if you're in the place with the weather, to get out and moonbathe, get out and moonbathe, or otherwise find a window and fuzzy blankets. And yeah, we have an opportunity to really look and have the light shown on, you know, do you want to build this? Is it worth your time and energy? And with Venus there, Venus is in Capricorn, she's really wondering, you know, are you going to put value on this and build it?
Yeah, and because it's an air sign, I mean, the thing that's been coming really loud lately is to ground, because I think with the Gemini, it's an air sign, and Jupiter in an air sign, he's an Aquarius. With air, air is beautiful. It allows us to, you know, touch into spirit. But if we don't ground, it can feel a little disorienting. And especially Gemini, I have many people in my life who have strong Gemini in their chart. And I'm an Aquarius, so I have strong air as well. But sometimes even Gemini for me is like, whoa, like I need to slow it down a little bit because it can feel very fast moving. It's mutable air. So it's this fast moving, like, quality of air, which is also the way we think, our, you know, intellect and all of these pieces. And so it can be very overwhelming. Like our mind can kind of just take right over. And then Jupiter's there expanding. He's in Aquarius. So there's, right, we always talk about the shadow and the kind of higher octave of something. So the shadow can be that we can get caught up in our mind and the anxieties and kind of get swept away. So the grounding feels really important. And then also, that the next day we have Venus stationing retrograde. So there's a switch there. We're going within. So that's a big shift. And then we also have Uranus, which we'll get into. Uranus is making some big aspects. And I've been saying lately, like, it kind of has felt for me like Mercury retrograde almost. And I think part of it is because Mercury and Uranus will aspect each other. And Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So it almost can feel like a Mercury retrograde 2.0 when Uranus is getting ready to like drop some big things into our life, even if it's just a big insight or a new thought. Sometimes we can feel that like disorienting kind of component of Mercury retrograde type of energy. It's not Mercury retrograde, but it can feel like that. So I just keep really getting ground and like go outside, do grounding practices, like just be in your body. Remember, like take a deep breath, because this full moon, comes with a lot of air element.
So it's a lot of air element.
Yes. And so I'll touch on the Venus retrograde a little bit, because that'll kind of be a theme that'll bring us through December and January. But Venus stations retrograde conjunct Pluto. So there's a depth to this one. And we did a whole Patreon podcast on Venus and the myth of Inanna. So if you're curious, you can go check that out. But basically, it's Venus is preparing to go on a descent journey into the underworld. And when she's retrograde, she starts her cycle. She basically begins her descent right in the middle of the retrograde. So the retrograde, she's gathering information. She's kind of telling us what to keep an eye out for, what's going to be the theme for these next 40 days. That's about the length of a Venus retrograde. And to have Pluto in there, who rules the underworld and who brings a depth, there's definitely, some big messages that are coming for us around themes like our self-worth and the things we value and our relationship to our body, and any relationships in our lives. So that is all happening. December 19th is when Venus stations retrograde.
Love it. And it is like the thing that keeps coming is, how do I determine my value? How do I determine my own worth? Am I worth going after this thing that I want? Am I worth building on this? And with Pluto in there, he's gonna be mucking, like it's gonna, there's this feeling of like bringing up old things that we've maybe seen at one point, but we need to look at again and decide if we're going to continue to carry those items with us. Or is there some way we can transform or transmute them into something that serves us better, something that feeds our worth and our value, something that moves in harmony, because that's such a Venus word, harmony with what we're looking for, because we are building our world with every breath, with every thought, with every action. We're building our world.
And as you were talking, it's very clear, Chiron stations direct that day as well, the same day that Venus stations retrograde. And Chiron stationing direct feels like he's a medicine man. He's also the wounded healer, but it's bringing this medicine to our wounds. And it could be things that are coming up from the past. I've talked to a lot of people lately who are like, this old thing is coming up. Like, right. And that happens a lot because I always say it's a way, like, you know, spirit has to talk to us some way. And it's like, well, that's a story they know. Let's use that. Let's go to that story. But this time you're in a different place. And what is the medicine? Like, what, every time that thing comes up, if you go to the same place and you feel that same thing, well, there's something to be healed there. And so Chiron stationing direct, who he is the medicine man, he can bring medicine, because I think that's one of the things is, yes, we have to see our, you know, those parts of ourselves that aren't so comfortable, doesn't always feel good. But the beauty of being able to see those things is the medicine that comes with it, that we can choose to move forward in a different way. And so that happening the same day feels, yeah, pretty significant.
It does. Chiron is, and he's an Aries.
He's an Aries, yes.
He's an Aries right now. So there's this feeling of like healing our own sovereignty. Aries can be very independent creatures. Who feel like it needs to be done their way. And that can, the shadow side of that is it can be an exclusionary tactic. And that's not going to fix anything. It's not going to fix anything in the bigger world. And it's not certainly going to heal anything inside of us to be in that really exclusionary place. With our healing, like healing happens best and oftentimes most deeply when we're working with rather than shutting ourselves off from.
Exactly. And I feel like that happening as we're moving into Capricorn season, because the December 21st is the solstice. It's when the sun enters Capricorn. It feels like that's really important as we move into this transitionary point. So the solstice is a point for us in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the shortest day. It's when we begin to move towards the light. And for those in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the longest day. And then they begin to shift and move into the dark. So it's this transitionary point, right? Like we're always in transition, we're always in flux. But for all of that to happen, right, we have that full moon, we have the Venus retrograde, Chiron stationing direct right before the solstice. It feels like that is kind of preparing us for what's to come for this journey. I keep thinking of that Inanna, descent, of how she's preparing to go on that descent to the underworld. And then just a few days later, there's big things happening around the solstice. And Venus retrograde is unique because she's conjunct Pluto. Like that doesn't happen every time. That's very unique. And then a few days after the solstice, so December 24th, we have our third and final Saturn square Uranus. So this is an aspect that we've been in it really has flavored 2021. Like it has been the overarching theme of 2021. And they will still be in aspect to each other next year, but they will never hit that exact degree again. That was 3 times during 2021. So that happened first in February, mid-February, then mid-June. And now December 24th is the third and final square. And what that means, so Saturn I'll kind of bring it back. Saturn is in Aquarius, where he'll be for a few years. And Aquarius is a sign of the revolutionary. It's what do we need to do that is new, that hasn't been done before. But Saturn is very much, he's the builder. He rules, right? We said he rules Capricorn. He also rules Aquarius. And he's about bringing things in. He can often feel like the strict father is an archetype of him. Like, you know, it doesn't always feel good, but it's like, well, we have to do some work to make things happen. And he is squaring Uranus, who is the revolutionary. He is the great awakener, and he's in Taurus, which is an earth sign. He's very much about shifting and bringing things into being. So it's a very interesting, you know, dynamic between the two of them. And if you feel into the course of February, June, and December, you can feel in it to both collectively, like what that has meant for everyone as a whole, and then what that has meant for you personally. And you can also, you know, a good reminder, you can take a look at your chart and see what house Aquarius is in for you, because that is an area that is getting revolutionized, that is really shifting, and that, you know, Uranus is bringing his big shifting energy, and Saturn is going to be there for in Aquarius for a few years. But if you look at what house Aquarius is for you, you can get some information. Like, is it in your fourth house of home? And you're like, I know a couple people and they're moving, and like that whole thing is just wild. Or is it in your 10th house of career, and your career is just completely shifting? Is it in your house of relationships or your spirituality, right? So you can look at that and see what house Aquarius is in, because it's bringing some big revolution there.
Absolutely. I'm just giggling about all of the houses. That's all. And I heard something recently that Uranus is also called the King Destroyer, which part of me really loved that. I loved this idea of that part of what the Uranus energy is bringing is a shift to this idea of male rulership. With, you know, the Pluto return coming up, and this idea that so much of how everything is changing differently, and we want it to change the same. We're going to just encapsulate it in that little piece there. Like, what we're resisting is the fact that things are changing differently than they've ever changed before. And we're all doubling and tripling down because we want the changes to be what we're used to, because it's comfortable. And even if it keeps us small and it keeps us in our little boxes, and it gets in the way of life, it's much more comfortable for things to be changing the way they always changed, rather than pushing us with this Aquarian energy of, let's do it different. Let's change differently. Let's create things that have never been created before. And, you know, I always picture Uranus up there in the sky. He's like rolling along on his side, because he just moves differently. So there's in this square, there's this double revolutionary rebel energy with Uranus at one end and Aquarius at the other end, where we've got Uranus in really stable, slow moving Taurus. To keep in mind that change can happen really slowly. It's that oxen under the yoke plowing the field one step at a time. And it is one step at a time. For as much as it feels like there's this big radical, we can't slow this down, we can't slow it down. I hate to break it to you, and I don't hate to break it to you, because we all got no time. We cannot slow this down. And do we want to slow it down? Do we want to slow down the potential revolution of stepping into what we could be?
Yeah, and I think it's a really beautiful energy to kind of close out the year, knowing that 2022 we're moving into some really big, like, potential for dreams to be realized. And we'll go into this more in our forecast, but we have Jupiter moving into Pisces, and we have Neptune in Pisces, and they will meet up next year. And that's like, Pisces is the most expansive sign. It is the sign of dreams and just like the infinite. And Jupiter moving in there, it's bringing like so much potential.
Mhm.
And so that's another piece of it, of we get to choose like if we say yes or not. And so the more that we can, just dive in and say yes, and this energy of Saturn square Uranus, it's had the whole year to really poke at us, to really poke at our edges. And, we always have choice. And so it feels like the reminder though, is that you brought in potential of that is right. That's the beauty. None of this is happening so that we're just like, struggling and like, just having a rough time. It's so that we can expand into more. I mean, anyone that you look at who is successful or who has, is living like the life they want, they had to go through some things. They had to take some risks. They had to say yes to things without knowing what was going to be on the other side. And so that feels like, just to drop into that, the energy of 2022 is really supportive of that. But yeah, we just have to go through some things as we, shift into that. And then the next day, December 25th, Venus and Pluto are conjunct in Capricorn. So we've been in that because they formed a conjunction December 11th, and then Venus stationed retrograde, and they were really close. So they were pretty much conjunct, but they hit the exact degree on December 25th. And so this, again, it brings a deepening. It brings bringing up those parts of yourself that you've kept kind of hidden away. Maybe you don't believe that you can, fully express them, that for whatever reason, it's coming out. It's coming out.
Yeah, the thing that's like really pinged and lit up is that we all know the outcome of this. We're gonna die at some point. That's just what our guaranteed outcome is. The thing that we get to choose is how much living we do prior to that moment where we vacate our meat suit. And we know the outcome. And none of us want to get to that place and look back and wish we had seized those moments, like that carpe diem, like seize those moments and live your life, because there is this guaranteed outcome. And we don't need a guaranteed outcome on the choices, as long as they enliven our soul.
Yeah. And that's a great, like, how much do you want to live?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, how much do you want to experience? Because again, we're the ones who kind of hold that, thermostat, power of the thermostat.
Yeah, we agree to be put in the boxes we get put in.
Yeah.
And we don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was that last piece?
I said, we can push back.
Yes. Yeah. And it feels like a lot of the energy of 2021 was like preparing us and just shifting our thoughts, because Jupiter has been in Pisces for all of 2021. He entered Aquarius. Did I say Pisces? Yes. Yeah. Jupiter has been in Aquarius. He's going to enter Pisces, but he has been in Aquarius for all of 2021. He entered last December, and on December 28th, he will enter Pisces. So for all of 2021, Jupiter has been in Aquarius, which, it can be challenging because Aquarius really pushes the edges of the way we think. It's a revolutionary. It's right. It's really pushing the edges. And so that can be challenging for some people, for a lot of people, for all of us, because it's going to push all our edges and whatever our edges are, right? Like, that's what it does.
Mm.
And
I'm just like, that's such a vast understatement. It's challenging for some of us, or like 50% of the country.
or every single one of us, right? Because
every single
it's
person
pushing our edges. And so as Jupiter moves into Pisces, we had a preview. Jupiter dipped into Pisces in the spring, into early summer, but he'll be in Pisces for the majority of 2022. Although he dips into Aries and spends more time in Aries than, like, he almost does like half and half. He spends like a good half of the year in Pisces. He ends the year in Pisces as well. So if we look at like where he starts and finishes, he enters Pisces December 28th, and then he will finish up his cycle in Pisces the end of the year 2022. So Pisces, we kind of touched on it. Pisces is that sign of, it's very expansive. It's the sign of ruled by Neptune. It's the dreams and like just huge things beyond what we can imagine. It's almost like otherworldly. Also, the shadow side of Pisces can be addiction and, like numbing out through any different avenue, really. And so that's something to, again, like that feet on the ground, like stay grounded, feels really important as we move into that energy, because the potentials are huge and beautiful. And like we need to keep our feet on the ground. So that is December 28th, Jupiter enters Pisces.
I love that. I think a big piece of how Pisces has been working with us is really reminding us that we are all connected. Like it was such a big ongoing theme all the way through 2020. It was boots on the ground. Hey, look at how interconnected everything is. And that it tends to be how Pisces feels to me. Like we are all one, back to that we're pieces of the universe embodied. And if we're pieces of the universe, you're a piece of the universe, I'm a piece of the universe, we're all tangled up and the same. And that's really how Pisces feels for me when it's in that light. It's a reminder of those great spiritual truths of our interconnectedness.
Yeah, that is for sure Pisces. And when we think about the zodiac begins with Aries and ends with Pisces, that it goes on this journey. Like Aries is very much about the self. And then we go around this journey through the zodiac. And by the time we get to Pisces, it's the complete opposite. It's the oneness. It's that kind of universal collective energy. And so that's a big shift. Jupiter shifting into Pisces and finishing out his time in Aquarius also, because he spends about a year in each sign. And so closing out Aquarius, and also, so there might be some like big up till December 28th, some big last, like, especially with the Saturn square Uranus on the 24th, like, and Jupiter in those last degrees of Aquarius, like some big last like messages for us in the area of Aquarius. So you can, again, look at your chart, but even just in that general sense of the revolutionary thoughts and the like thinking bigger, that can be really pushing us. And what keeps coming is like pushing our edges. It's going to keep pushing at us because that's his last kind of go, right? He takes a while to come back around. So the messages might be really loud as far as what wants to be expanded, how you are being kind of pushed to expand up to that December 28th. And then he'll shift into Pisces and we'll get a totally different feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a fun thing to watch. I'm looking forward to more messages and more learning and more opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this Jupiter energy brings expansion to our sense of oneness. And I'm a hope springs eternal kind of gal. So I'm going with the light rather than, watching Jupiter expand the delusion, the word that always comes up with this Neptune in Pisces is fake news. I'm not interested in Jupiter expanding that. So that's not what I'm requesting here. I'm requesting a Jupiterian. Is that right? Is that we're going to go with it? Jupiterian expansion of the consciousness around our oneness.
Yeah.
We can throw the rest of it out. Just pitch it out with it.
Yeah. And I'm really interested to see how that shows up collectively too. Like as we are all in this expansion of our consciousness with Jupiter and Pisces for the next year, what that looks like. And to like pay attention to the, where you can maybe go too far off into the fantasy or the illusion, right? Because that's part of it too. That it's both of it, and it's all okay as long as we are kind of feeling into like why, like what is the why, right? Like why is that maybe dream or fantasy important to you, and then bring it back in to okay, and what can I do now, right? Rather than just living in a fantasy. So that is Jupiter and Pisces, which we'll go a lot more into that in our forecast because he will be there the whole year. And then he does dip into Aries. He dips into Aries mid-May through the end of October, which is a pretty good chunk of time. So that's interesting too, in that he's in this like expansive, like, dream world. And then he goes into Aries, which is not that. Aries is like, how can we start and initiate and get things going, right? Like, how can we plant the seeds and like get moving? And so it feels like those two, that he spends more of his time in Aries than say like when he dipped into Pisces last year. He dipped in for a short time, but when he dips into Aries, he's there for a longer time, and that actually feels supportive.
It does,
because I feel like you can, like the energy of Pisces, like you can get lost in it. So that he, dips into Aries for a good chunk of the year feels good. And then he'll come back in and he'll finish the end of the year in Pisces, which is great. But we get a good chunk of time with Jupiter expanding Aries. And it feels like there's some like ability to really get things going.
Yeah, that cardinal fire of Aries, like there's this, I'm just seeing this ignition point of taking that expansion. I can talk today. Sucking it up here. This expansion of the awareness of our conscious oneness and bringing that into Aries and allowing that cardinal fire of Aries to bring some, like I'm seeing Bridget, she's the patron saint of metal workers, and how metal workers, you make a sword and you pound it, you fold the metal and you pound it, and there's a honing that takes place. And the fire of Aries bringing that ability to hone the expanded consciousness as Jupiter, takes a little foray into Aries and work some stuff there. And how do we expand this in a way that is going to maybe light some fires in people to carry that forward?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it feels very supportive. So that feels like a good thing. And yeah. And then on December 29th, we have Mercury meets up with Venus. So Venus, who is now retrograde at this point, meets up with Mercury. So right, Mercury brings some messages there. And again, we're in that 40-day retrograde. So that comes back around. Mercury comes around, and then the next day he forms a conjunction with Pluto. So it feels like the meeting with those two energies yeah, at the very end of the month, the 29th and the 30th, like, again, just all we have to do is listen, but it feels like there's some big stuff with Mercury meeting up with Venus and Pluto.
Yeah, I'm going to sit over here and just have full body shivers. That's what I have to add to that portion of the conversation. Full body.
Yeah, if you're just listening and not watching the video, Amiee basically just had full body, shivers as we were talking about Mercury meeting up with Venus and Pluto. So again, those Venus themes around our self-worth and whatever is really coming up for us around that Venus retrograde. Also, if you are a Taurus or a Libra rising, that means Venus rules your chart, and there can be just extra emphasis for you. So I like to always, kind of mention also who we have as a ruler. So if you have, again, Taurus rising or Libra rising in your chart, Venus is the ruler of your chart. And so you can feel some extra kind of juice there. And Pluto bringing the depth. He's bringing that, like he wants it all. And it's also interesting that it's the end of the year. It's like, we're going all the way in, and we're, going to see these pieces. Yeah, that feels like that energy.
Yeah, there's a beautiful holding to it, that it feels solid and stable, and it tends to be easier to bring up those pieces when there's a stability in it. And Pluto in Capricorn has a level of stability.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so that's Mercury meeting up with them. That's basically right before he moves out of Capricorn. So then on January 2nd, Mercury moves into Aquarius, makes a trine to the North Node, which is now at 1 degree of Gemini, getting ready to shift. But Mercury moves into Aquarius January 2nd, which is also the same day as a new moon in Capricorn trine Uranus. So that's a lot. So let's break that down, because that's that day. We got Mercury shifting into Aquarius, aspecting the nodes. We have a new moon in Capricorn aspecting Uranus. So yeah, what are you feeling to start us off with that?
I'm feeling this moon Uranus piece. This is it's our first new moon of 2022. We've got more of that Uranus energy, and that Uranus energy, keeping in mind that Uranus may not be exact to the degree square with Saturn, but Uranus is still in this square, which can feel like conflict with Saturn, while Luna herself is coming in her dark goddess place, in her darkness, to bring in what could be our darker emotions. And how do we revolutionize? It is revolutionary to embrace our darker emotions. Especially for those in female bodies. Like, rage, not okay. Oftentimes a lot of our boundaries that say we're going to take care of ourselves, not okay. Like, we have an area on the spectrum of feelings that is okay. And it feels like this lunation can bring in a broadening of that spectrum, and Uranus bringing that rebel call to, come run with the wolves, because the wolves get all their feelings. So come run with the wolves.
Yeah. It just feels like one hell of a way to kick off the year, because I'm feeling into like Mercury holding a megaphone to like the North Node. Like, here we go. Like, we're going to really make sure to start the year, like, it's really loud of what the potential is and where you want to go. And right. And the North Node is always that uncomfortable territory of like, your soul wants to go there. Like, there's a part of you who is like, yes. And then there's your very real human self who is like, wait, what does that mean? I want to know some details before I agree to this. And of course, like, we can't. That's part of the whole thing, is we don't get to know. And so having Mercury, who just enters Aquarius, right? And they're both those, that's air signs. So that's also like the last couple days of the North Node in Gemini.
Yeah.
So for Mercury to come in and like hold this, if they're in a trine, so it feels like there's this harmonious working together, like he's working with the North Node to be like, okay, we're going to like bring this message in with this new moon, which is the first new moon of the year, a new cycle. And then Uranus, you add some like lightning bolts in there, and you add some like, right, like big time activating energy. It just feels like it's a really big and beautiful way to start off the year, right? Which may come with some, oh my God, like it's a new year, right? Like crap.
And keeping in mind how many of us move, how culturally acceptable it is for, well, it's a new year and I'm going to consciously start a new cycle to bring these things in. Uranus is in Taurus, which is our body and is our physical world. And to really be able to harness and hold on to this change, this lightning Uranus change, in a way that supports and holds our bodies and our physical lives. It feels like there's a lot of great potential there. To tap into Mercury, really making sure that, this, last lunation with the nodes in Gemini Sag gets a last little bump. Hey, North Node's shifting. Make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that closing of a 1.5 chapter. So the nodes stay in a sign for about 1.5 years, and they will shift. So the date that they shift, which we'll come back to, is January 18th. The nodes will shift into Taurus and Scorpio. So it's that closing of a chapter. It's that closing of a 1.5 years chapter. And so although we're starting a new year, we're still in that closing of the chapter. And so with all this really big energy, it's not to be overwhelming. It's just to really show us like, this is where we want to go. And then the next day, Jupiter squares the North Node. So it feels like we're getting some really big North Node action in there, which the North Node, it is like that guiding light, right? It's that flag waving saying, come this way. Just one step at a time. It's all you have to do, but just baby steps, right? Like we can baby step, but it's not about getting stuck, because we can get very stuck and scared and like just be in that spinny place. Mm-hmm. So Jupiter is bringing a little bit of a challenge. He's going to like kind of poke us because he's in Pisces now. And this is the last kind of piece of the North Node in Gemini. He's going to kind of bring a challenge here. Like I'm this expansive sign, right? Like how much do you really believe that what you want is possible? Like, do you really believe it? Because it's one thing to dream it and see it as some, off in the distance thing. But do you really believe that it is possible? And so that is January 3rd. Jupiter squares the North Node.
That's so good. Yeah. So often what stops us from going after what we want is that we don't believe we can get it. We're the people standing in our own way.
Oh, all the time. Yes.
So I love that, are you going to commit to wanting this? Whatever this is, are you going to like go all in? Completely orientate yourself and go there.
And on January 8th, we have the Sun conjunct Venus. So this is the beginning of her cycle. She has a new cycle about every 18 to 19 months. And so when she is basically between us and the sun, that's her, it's called her inferior conjunction, when she meets up with the sun in the position where she is closest to us. So she is closest to Earth at this point. And this is where she begins her cycle. So the messages of Venus retrograde can get really loud right now. There's a moment called Amiee when she is in the heart of the sun, and those messages are just so clear. like all of the pieces that have been coming through for the first half of the retrograde just become really clear. And again, right, all those pieces around our self-worth, the things we value, our relationships. And it feels like all of that is like, where does all of that fit into where you want to go? Like, does that match up with where you want to go? Like, who is that person you envision in that, right? That the things you want, your dreams, like, how can you align yourself to that person? Because you are that person. Yeah. Right? It's just the uncovering. It's not about becoming anything else. I love that quote. It's not about becoming anything else. It's really about unbecoming everything that you aren't. It's really all it is. And so that feels like that, like Venus in the heart of the sun moment, that Cazimi moment of like, there's that clarity and that knowing, but then, you know, hold on to that, like journal it, write it down, write it on a post-it note and stick it on the fridge, because then she switches out of that. And then that moment is gone. And then she goes on the second half of her retrograde. But we can still hold on to that because what came through is the truth. We might forget it like a couple of hours, a couple of days later, and we might not, you know, remember it, but like, remember that day, January 8th, just like journal, take some notes, just like, you know, feel into what comes up, because the messages that come from Venus that day will carry us through the rest of the retrograde.
Yeah, it feels really like a choice between power over and love of. Like, are you going to love yourself enough to stand in your own power rather than reaching out and trying to, you know, power over things outside? And yeah, there's gonna maybe be some little messiness as she goes combust on both sides of her Cazimi.
Yes.
And that is when she's in, I always picture an explosion and the turbulence of the air in that explosion is how combust feels for me, that she's traveling through that turbulence to get to the heart of the sun.
Yeah.
And then she's there and she's going to get her messages. Make your post-it notes, people. And then she's going to go through more turbulence on her way out.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes just sit with it to like, you know, stay with it and ask the questions. And because I feel like there's this, like, I've just seen like this beautiful like mantra that can come for you. Like it comes from within you. Like you just come up with this beautiful like message for yourself. But you have to sit with it for a little bit. You have to make the space for the listening and to kind of be with that. And then a few days later on January 11th, Mars squares Neptune. So Mars, who's in Sagittarius, squares Neptune in Pisces. Amy's making some faces. What are you feeling, Amy?
So squares are, you know, that challenge. And squares can be a moment of harnessing those two energies and having them work together. One of my favorite, because I'm so body-based, one of my favorite ways to look at a square is when a normal person sits in a chair. I tend to curl up and mutate myself. But when a normal person sits in a chair, they often sit with their feet on the floor. So we're going to put Neptune down on the floor here in this case. And then you've got a 90-degree, your feet on the floor, here's Neptune, and you've got this 90-degree angle, and your hips are going to be Mars. And there can be well, we're not doing anything, like that conflict piece. And when those two energies work together, that can propel us into a standing position, that can move us into a place where we can take action. So see, we're bringing in the Mars. So we can take action into potentially more clarity, more expansion. Neptune has begun in the past, I don't know, year or so to take on this very androgynous feel for me. Neptune is a higher vibratory level of Venus. And, you know, Mars and Venus are going to be, they're doing their own dance right now, the lovers. And there is a flavor of that with Mars meeting up with Neptune for me, because Neptune is this higher vibratory level of Venus.
Yeah. And what comes for me too with Mars, I always think about desire. And he's in a fire sign, he's in Sagittarius. So there's this desire component. And then you bring in Neptune, who is this higher octave of Venus and this higher octave of love. It feels like there's this big challenge in like expressing the ability to express your desires, and the ability to, like, you have to be in your body. Like, desire is a body based, it's a sensual experience, right? It's not a transcendent experience. Desire is very body based, and both Venus and Mars are personal planets. They're very body based. And so there's this ability to connect with our bodies and to connect with our desires. And it feels like with that higher octave of Neptune, there is this like sacredness to it. There is this like beautiful essence to it, but it's a challenge to us. It's going to poke at us. Like, do you really, are you going to embrace your desires and your ability to express them? Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Alexis got us there. Alexis, woman.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. January 11th. Also 11 is a master number, so it just feels like there's some like, yeah, good potential that day. And just a few days later, Mercury stations retrograde. So we get one of, he stations retrograde a few times a year. We get our first of 2022 on January 14th. It's a retrograde in Aquarius, and it's squaring Uranus.
So in case anybody was making some mistake in your head that Uranus was going to like be done with us, we're going to dispel that rumor right now. Uranus is not finished.
He's never done with us. He's always there. Like, right. They just come up at different moments. But yeah, that's how Mercury begins his retrograde in an air sign of Aquarius. Right. And so that's the thing to remember too. Like, we're never like, oh, good, we're done. Like, as Jupiter moves out of Aquarius and we move out of the big Aquarius energy of 2021, we get an Aquarius season every year. We get different planets moving into Aquarius at different times. So we just get more Aquarius.
I shifted it in my settings. It's just not doing it.
Maybe this is a preview of like, yeah, so this is another thing that's coming up is I'm hearing a lot of people saying like 2021 was a challenge. Like, I hope 2022 is better. And I feel like you hear people say that sometimes, like at the end of the year as we enter a new year. And it's like, this is it. Like, it's either like get on the right, like get on the ride, or like there's no going back or slowing down or, oh, it should be better. Like, to me, that's a very like dualistic and a very like linear way of thinking. And it does feel like we have, since 2020, we have kind of jumped onto this like high speed train.
Yeah.
But like, here's the thing. We just stay on that train. Like, that's the new normal. That's the new pace. And it's really important to like find your spot in that, to find yourself in that. Like, I don't think we've ever been challenged as much to like be in our bodies, to connect in, because the more I'll just say out of body you are, or, however off you are, it's going to feel like it's faster, and it's going to feel like, when are things going to slow down? Well, they're not.
I think you're touching into something that the train isn't going to slow down. We're moving at the speed we're moving. And I think that those people who are wanting to like stop this train, wherever this train is headed, none of us know where this train is headed. And we're going to see people departing the planet Because their contracts here are done. Because their contract doesn't include staying on the fucking train. Because this is what the deal is. We are in a massive universal galactic upgrade.
And the really exciting part of that, and the really like, right, like it is exciting, is that we get to move into places that we haven't been, and that like it's big stuff. And if you can get on and you can like get on the train and be like, okay, yep, this is the new speed, like I'm all for it, like life will gift you.
So hugely.
Hugely.
So hugely.
Yeah. Like that's the thing though, but you have to say yes. You have to be like, I'm on, like I'm ready for this speed. And not that we want things to be chaotic, or not that we want things. It's just this is the right, like this is the new normal. And how can you like say yes rather than fighting against it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it's so huge and it's so loud. How can we say yes rather than pushing back against things that are so far out of our control? Our control ends at our fingertips, and how we meet the moment to moment. I go back to every single moment is a spiritual test. How are you meeting the moment that you're with right now, rather than worrying about what's done or worrying about what's coming? It is the right now. Are you living the life that you're called to live, that you want to live, that lights your whole person up? Or are you just fucking trudging along in somebody else's idea of what the world is supposed to look like? Come on, people.
What's coming is the Matrix. I guess there's a new Matrix movie coming out.
I watched the preview today.
And that keeps poking of like when you take the red pill and you like kind of get out of the Matrix, you can jump across buildings, like you can do all of these amazing things because you're not living in this robotic Matrix. So that's what's on offer.
I really love that you bring it in, and I watched the preview today, and we didn't mention this to each other at all until this moment that you all get to be a part of. Yeah, because the Matrix, when we step out, it is leaping tall buildings. It is like being able to shield ourselves from that which is not going to serve us. Because apparently Neo can use the Force in the Matrix movie.
I love it. We'll have to have a watch party.
Totally.
For the new Matrix. Yes.
We're going to have to go back and do the other three though, because it's been so long.
Oh, I just did that recently. That was one of my like 2020, like when everything was kind of like pandemic. I was like, we're gonna rewatch the Matrix movies. But I highly suggest it because there were parts that I was like, whoa, like when it first came out, I watched it and that was a long time ago. So yes, definitely rewatch.
Okay, so homework for everybody is a Matrix rewatch, and we'll set up a Matrix 4 watch party or something.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, so that brings us to January 17th. We have a full moon in Cancer opposing Pluto. That is, it's at 27 degrees of Cancer. So it has that opposition of Cancer in the water and the mother, and Capricorn can be the father, has that polarity there. There can be some ancestral, some family pieces coming up whenever Cancer is involved. That can, the ancestral lineage pieces. And then to have it opposing Pluto though, right? Again, it brings this depth. It brings this like deep excavating energy. And yeah, I mean, it's still just like the Matrix is poking of like, Pluto is anti-Matrix. Like Pluto is
Morpheus.
Yeah, he's like, nope, like we're not playing that game. Mm-hmm. We're getting in and we're getting in deep so that we can get to the reality which is actually more than we can see. So yeah, so that would be our first full moon of 2022.
And it feels like like my whole womb space really lit up when you said full moon in Cancer. And there's a sexuality to Pluto, because he does want all of it. And so there's a sexuality to Pluto in this, with this Cancerian moon. Like I really just felt the weight of that settle in. And so, consider doing some womb work. Just going to offer that invitation to everybody, and keeping in mind that the womb is our space of creativity. And whether you have a physical womb or not, you have an energetic space that holds your creativity while it gestates before it comes out and emerges into the world. And how we work with our space of holding and gestating our ideas is really invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. And also to think back to the new moon in Cancer, which would be about 6 months ago. I don't have the date on hand, but to think about, it's this fullness. It's this like peak. A full moon is a peak of that cycle. And so there also is that part of like, you can't rush when you're creating a project, or if you're having a physical baby, right? Whatever that is being birthed, like there's no rushing it. And so although there is that 6-month cycle, like you might be at a peak of a point in a project or something that you're creating. And so that full moon can also bring some illuminations around what you are creating.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes. And then we'll kind of bring it to the end of Capricorn season, because we will enter Aquarius season on January 19th. So right before that, the end of Capricorn season on January 18th, Uranus, who we've been talking about, stations direct. So here we go. It's another big Uranus moment of him shifting from a retrograde that he's been in. So the outer planets, they station retrograde, and they're in retrograde for longer periods of time. And so he's doing that, squaring Mercury and making a trine to Venus. So yeah, there's just, you can't make it.
Just sit here and like do an evil laugh cackle fest. And I think that would cover it.
So there's the bigness there of, Mercury, right? He holds a megaphone up and like really brings the messages in loud. He also will be retrograde though. So it's going to be in that introspective space as Uranus stations direct, aspecting Venus, who will still be, she'll still be in her retrograde.
Yeah, she's still going to be in her retrograde.
They're going to be in her retrograde. So both of those are going to be in retrograde. Mercury and Venus are going to be in retrograde as Uranus stations direct. Like there's a interesting polarity there, and an interesting igniting of your inner self.
And keeping in mind that Mercury and Venus are personal planets. They are closest to the earth. They're closest to us. And Mercury retrograde for me so often is about how are we speaking to ourselves? I work with so many women. I will often ask them, are the things you say to yourself things you would ever, ever, ever say to your mother, your daughter, any woman that you love? And so there is this aspect of self-talk, and then with Venus there especially, what is our self-talk, and how does that affect our sense of our own worth and our own value? And I feel like we have beat Uranus like he's a dead horse.
Yeah, he's super loud. So lots of revolutionary energy, and that's all in the energy of the full moon. So the full moon peaks the previous day, but we're still in that full moon energy, which brings in more of that, like it's very introspective. It's very, Cancer is it's ruled by the moon. It's that inner space, like our emotions, that inner like home. And so it feels like, even though it's a full moon, which can be sometimes like bigger and brighter and that outward energy, it actually has a very introspective energy, especially with Mercury and Venus being retrograde. So yeah, it feels like the revolutionary things are going to come within our own selves. Like that feels like the message that day. And that's the same day that the nodes shift, that the North Node shifts into Taurus and the South Node shifts into Scorpio for the next year and a half. So that whole time around that full moon in Cancer feels really big.
It does feel really big. And keeping in mind that when something as massive as the Titanic wants to shift directions, it takes time. So this Uranus is not just going to shift and like, whoo, into the sunrise. It's a slow process. And then he's going to be in his shadow period as he comes out of that. So the messages that have come in and the learning and the opportunity that has come in for every individual, every, concentric circle of existence, they're still going to be there. Because until he hits a new degree at the end of his shadow period, we're still dealing with those things. We're still looking for resolution. We're still looking for what is the next best step here. And do I want to carry this with me, or is it time to set it down? And it may feel really revolutionary to set it down, and it's time. Especially it feels like with the nodal shift, it really feels like a setting down and getting out of head pieces and really into our body and our sensuality. Like we're moving into a Taurus-Scorpio, like body and sex for a year and a half.
Yeah. And having the nodes in fixed signs. So the nodes have been in mutable. Gemini and Sagittarius are mutable signs. They're going to be moving into fixed signs of Taurus and Scorpio. It does feel supportive in a way that we're moving out of so much has shifted. Like the last year and a half has been a lot of mutable is that shifting. It's that changing energy. We've been in that really. When I think back, so the nodes, I believe like around June 2020.
Yeah, it was June 2020 because I think that first June eclipse on the 5th.
Yeah. So around that time, that was like right in the middle of the pandemic, like right at the, we hadn't, March of that year was when things really like took off. Like that last year and a half, huge change. Like to say a huge change is an understatement. To have the node shifting into fixed signs feels very supportive, but it's also like, and here we go. Like the body piece feels relevant. And Scorpio, having the South Node in Scorpio is that's a whole thing. That's a whole vibe on its own of like releasing. And Scorpio is the underworld. So the South Node is what we want to release. And Scorpio is like the underworld. It's our deep, deep, like unconscious. And so that's an interesting piece to have the South Node there. And then to have the North Node and like, here is where we want to go. Like we want to have this, I mean, like the Garden of Eden is kind of what's coming in of like, we want to have this like ability to live and have this beautiful earth and this beautiful sensual life, but not the like, no, like none of those like rules and the like, you can't, because what also comes with that is the shame and the like all of the pieces of like, there are rules and there are things that I can't express. And, of course there's discernment and there is like, right. Like there are things that are, toxic and not healthy to it, to a degree. But when you enter into that healthy space of this Garden of Eden with no like patriarchal rules, we'll put it that way.
That's great.
That there is this really beautiful energy to have that in a fixed sign of Taurus. The North Node is like where we want to go. To have that in Taurus feels really supportive. And so it feels like we can have heaven on earth. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
It's not about when we die and we go like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about here and now. right? Because like we'll go on some other adventure, our soul, like, right, but it won't be in this body.
Yeah.
It won't have this chance to be here in this body now. And so the North Node in Taurus will be, well, you know, we'll enter that chapter, that 1.5 year chapter on January 18th, and we'll get to be there for a while. But having that fixed energy does feel really supportive and like making things happen in a way that we couldn't have with all the mutable energy of the last 1.5 years.
Yeah, the thing that's coming up is circling me back to, like, I am feeling like the Scorpio, the sexual healing with the Scorpio South Node. Like, how can we heal our sexuality? And, you know, Taurus, like, to do that, we have to be in our bodies and we have to be real and present. And it just feels really delicious and very potent. And potent is the root of the word potential. Do the math.
I'm very excited about the nodes.
Super excited
too.
I'm super excited. There also feels like there's going to be some cleaning up and some reckoning, because Scorpio can be secretive in its shadow, and it can be private in its, like, I feel like private and secretive are two very different things. And one of the things that we see is a lot of oversharing going on. And I feel like there can be a better, like, to bring in that discernment piece. Like, what is ready for public consumption? And maybe it is never ready for public consumption. For Pete's sake, enough already. My phone does not ring this much ever. Ever. I'm all like post-session punchy and my phone's going crazy and I can't get it to shut off on my computer.
With the like heavy Uranus podcast, like, yeah, and I'm telling you, like, Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury, and Mercury is about our communication and all of those things. And there was just one last piece with the Uranus stationing direct, that all of that, like, as the nodes shift into Taurus and Scorpio, there is this very big message of, like, it starts with us, right? As Mercury is retrograde, as Venus is retrograde, that yes, we can have the beautiful, you know, heaven on earth, but we have to like start here. That's what the nodes start with, right? We get this 1.5 year chapter, but it's going to start right here. So yeah, that is how we close out Capricorn season. Capricorn is one hell of a season.
So happy Capricorn season. Please know that for a mere $10, you can join our highest tier Patreon. And we're going to we dove into this whole Venus retrograde and Nana cycle, and our 2022 forecast will be out before 2022.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. That will be one of our podcasts. It'll be out the end of December, so keep an eye out for that, because that'll be really good as we enter into 2022. Like, as you can feel, there's a lot of shifting, right? And we're closing out a year, entering a new year, so there is that shifting energy, and sometimes it's nice to know, you know, again, astrology, it's not going to tell you what's going to happen, but it gives you the weather. It gives you an idea of like, okay, how can I, you know, what do I need to wear a raincoat? Do I need to like dress light? It gives you the forecast.
I'm just loving it that you said raincoat, because I was picturing like a yellow raincoat and like ducky rain boots.
So yeah, so get your raincoat ready for 2022. But it can shift really fast. So who knows? The next day might be bright and sunny and you need to, like, you know, wear light layers. Yeah, I think we're good. So I think this is a good place to close, because Amiee and I now are getting like a little giggles going.
Happy Capricorn season, everybody. Thanks for joining us.